Perfect. I'm a voice actor that's done a bunch of video games. If you think of like a musician, if I was a musician, I'd be a session player. It's like nobody knows who I am, but I'm in a lot of stuff. You know, that's how I like to look at it. Because when you're up on a panel with all these people who have been working in Hollywood and stuff, you're like, I'm just not in the same group here. But it's still fine. People still love what I did. But I'm curious, you folks in the back, you got 3 people I don't remember seeing. Do you know who I am?
Unfortunately, I don't.
That's okay.
I saw the panel. I saw that you're a voice actor. I
Yep.
did radio production for my school's radio station.
Okay.
So I was like, I do voice acting like online stuff.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time. I was like, anything voice acting is interesting. And then she's just tagging along with me.
I can prove you wrong, sir. But I can tell you, voice acting has gone from what they were talking about in the other room there, you know, where you're the classic mode where you go to a studio, you know, they have a booth, or you go to a sound studio and they do it, and you get directed by somebody. It's really moving away from that, as much as no one would like to think it's going to, but it is moving away from that, because the internet connects everything and everybody so much. So that's how I've been doing the last several games that I've done, whether it was directing or voicing in. I did it from home. I didn't even have to travel, and I use different things for directing people, from all over. I've just directed someone who was living in Australia like this past year, and I thought, man, this is going to be a terrible lag, between me, okay, now do it this way, and wait. But it was actually, we hit it on a perfect day. It's like my internet was good, theirs was good, and he said his was notoriously terrible where he was living in Sydney.
Hopefully it's not on fire.
No, oops, sorry. No. Yeah, this was before that was a big issue. But again, what the point was that just you can do so much just over the internet. You don't have to go, to the studios all the time.
It might be like half my stuff recorded in my closet.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you do it under different blankets, or do you like shout into your clothes, or?
It's like half of it's like clothes. It's
Yep.
not like the biggest closet.
Yep.
I just make do with it.
Sure.
The equipment takes care of a lot of it for me.
Yep. Well, let me tell you, the guy who has been doing, just to switch gears, I'm going to be talking about Dying Light 2. Basically, that's the sequel to the big zombie parkour game that's coming. It's supposed to be released this year.
Are you playing Dying Light 2?
We'll see. All I was going to tell you is the actor that I've been working with, that's been doing all the work in the E3 promos. They did trailers and they did a whole little demo that they showed people. He's the guy playing the main character. Everything he did and recorded for all that, it's right up to game specs. I mean, it would be just as good as if it was the real game and everything. Right. Everything he did, he is recording it in his closet in Los Angeles, because he's an LA-based Hollywood actor, but he's working in his closet because it was all the pre-game recordings that we have to do, and there's tons of that, and so. They weren't saying you have to go to a studio. And it sounds as pristine as it would in a studio, because he knows what he's doing. He's done his research. He's, looked into how he has to, acoustically muffle all the outside noises and stuff. But he's like one of the best ones I got.
Some behind the scenes for Red vs. Blue.
Mm-hmm.
And they had several actors who were LA-based, and that's how they recorded every single one of their lines for the first 7 seasons.
I believe it.
They would just literally have all their dialogue. They'd sit in their closet for 12 hours, record all the lines,
Yep.
and then email them to the rest of the team.
And honestly, that's how it's being done more and more. If you go online, if you're someone that wants to do voice acting, you can find all these resources now that didn't exist 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
And excuse me.
Technology grows.
Yeah, but it's also just the opportunities to even get a chance to perform are out there, because that's one of the most difficult things is when you are wanting to be a voice actor. How do you get experience? Whether you want to do commercials or anime or games, how do you get experience? You know, that's no one wants to hire you unless you know what you're doing. So
Everybody in every single voice acting panel that I've been for here or any other convention always asks about jobs and how do you get them.
yeah,
And every time I've asked, well, not on a personal level, but in those panels, the talent that's being asked the question immediately responds with that they got lucky.
okay.
Every time it's lucky because they did what they
Because, well, again, most of those, I don't know about which panels you've seen, but most of the actors that I've dealt with who are known people, not just the ones that, you know, I just was with, but they come from a different sort of environment than exists now. That's what I'm saying. And so what exists now is so many people doing homegrown stuff, like, you know, fan dubs, they call them, those kind of things. Whatever you think about them, a fan dub is at least good practice, at the very least, you know?
professional work. It's hard.
It's not professional, you can't be paid, you know, but it gets you accustomed to what's going to be required of you, you know, little things like that. And some people are doing that, you know, the people that are asking for actors, they've never done it, you know, so you're going to run into that too, you know, people just don't know what they're doing. But what I would tell people if they're trying to, you know, get into voice acting is to check out things like those online, you know, for a start, to check out things like the casting club. I can't think of what it's called. Cartoon casting club. I am being really dim right now.
There's several of those.
There's several of them, yes, and you could.
That's just voice acting club.
Yeah, that's another one. Yep. And they're basically amateur hour, for lack of a better term. Not trying to say that, you know, in a derogatory way, but that's what it is. It's basically people, professional studios and projects are not going there to find your jobs, you know, to find actors. They're just not going to do it.
I would say, like, especially the voice acting club, I landed an audition on there, like, fresh out of high school, and we had to, like, California to record.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
Now and I are talking about two different voice acting clubs.
but it's guys in the industry who, like, want to get stuff done on their own, but they don't have, like, the funds.
Right.
It costs bonus to people.
Right.
And it never wound up going anywhere, but it was like amazing.
So they literally paid to fly you out to
They
California?
paid to fly me out to California.
From where?
From Idaho. You know, I grew up-
Wow. That's there you go. Got lucky. Okay? Because that's the kind of job you're not going to find normally. You know. Now, did they pay you for that too?
No, it was more like once we get the ball rolling, we'll
Yep.
pay you with the proceeds. But
Yep.
I mean,
Okay, well then that makes a little bit more sense. So basically they spent their voiceover budget on an airplane ticket, which is, you know, like you said, you go out there to the indie showcase there with the games, those guys are like one person, some of them, you know. I've been talking to them, they're awesome, incredibly passionate. I love those people because those are my people, as I say, because I do so much work for indie games. And I help them as much as I can because I also do casting, you know, so it's like if somebody, you know, emails me or whatever, or they get referred to me and they're looking for voices for their game that they're just building, but they have like no budget, sometimes I can help them with people that they need. Sometimes I can't. If they have a budget, I can roll out thousands of people, you know, and I've done it. That's one of the things I do auditions, go sifting through them all, and, you know, that's a time-consuming process that a lot of developers can't do. They can't afford to pay a whole bunch of people to do it. So, you know, but that's really interesting that they did it that way. Now, would you have been able to record it from Idaho?
no, I was just a kid. It was like actually like a year after I actually.
That's interesting.
ready to get started.
But that's interesting. I'm sorry, but I really am curious. What was the project for?
It was for. It was one of the guys who was working on one of the Silent Hill games. Like he wanted to split off and do his own thing. Somewhat similar. You can see like like where it's rubbing off on.
Yep.
It's supposed to be like a CG animated series. In years past, he's kind of adapted it to like an audiobook.
Yep. Quiet Mountain. I'm just curious. That's interesting. That's interesting. But again, I hear these kind of things. A lot of people, they're working for a whole development team, and they may be good at what they're doing, they're happy to do it, but they wouldn't mind doing things different. So, and they know enough about the whole industry, they can strike out on their own if they want. I mean, there's a lot of studios that have started like that, and some of those guys out there, so it's way to go. Any questions you guys might have? Oh, you have a question.
How much crossover is there between voice acting and audiobooks? Because it seems similar, but it also seems different.
You mean crossover in terms of the actual technical side of it, or you mean in terms of actors doing both?
Right.
Well, again, nowadays, it's different than it used to be. It used to be if you were going to record an audiobook, you'd go to a studio, and they'd have it you'd have an entire novel in a stack of paper, That's often what they do. I have a person I've worked with 1,000 times. He's an audio book award winner. He's a producer. And that's what he does, because that works for him. He takes the entire text of a novel or a book, whatever they're going to read, and he prints it out. And then he'll go through reams of paper. I'm like, oh my God, I just... You're right, but again, the crossover, it's different now, because in the old days, like I said, you go to a studio, but now you have things like ACX, which is the author and voice recording. It's sort of like an exchange. I don't remember what that stands for, ACX, but it's that type of thing. Audible is part of them. And basically, it's like if you're an author and you want to make an audio book of your work, that's where you would go to spend the least amount of money, especially if you don't have a publisher. If you've written this great book on, camping in Idaho, it's the type of thing. It's like who's gonna publish that, especially nowadays, because printing doesn't happen. But if you want to make an audio book of it, which is huge now, you can do that, but you're going to have to pay someone to do it. Now, if you want to pay like a regular actor to do it, that's going to cost you hundreds of dollars per finished hour, and that's not on top of whatever charges you may incur in the production of it. Because it's not just sitting there and reading. You could try that. That doesn't work. And it sounds nice and smooth, but if you sat there and tried to read without making a mistake, it's not going to happen unless you're, like a savant. That's possible. What's that?
It sucks.
It is. It does, absolutely. Because I have only done audiobook style recordings for my own purposes. Like I've done like Duncan Fisher stories and stuff, and I put it on YouTube just for fans. That's what I was doing it for. And that was I've done that sort of thing, and I've done it for another author who was a friend of mine. He had a short thing, he wanted to read it. And my take on it was that this is much more grueling as a performer than anything else I've done. Now some people, they make their living on it. That's all they do, and they do an excellent job, but they have a system down, and they don't go crazy with characters. There's just little subtle changes when they're reading, and sometimes that's all you need. And their whole voice and everything else is adapted very well to it. But most voice actors, after about an hour, your voice does not sound the same. It just doesn't, because you're talking and talking and talking. Even in your normal pitch, normal volume, everything else, it wears down. And when you're doing an audiobook, it has to sound exactly the same to the entire thing. No stress can sound, you can't, it can be. Some people won't do it more than once. I've learned, I won't. If someone wanted to pay me, thousands of dollars to record their book, I'd say, sure, give me a year. Because I could do it, but I'm not going to try to do it in a few days. This is just would be terrible. And that doesn't count, the editing time. All that takes so much time. And that's what I mean. On these exchanges and things, they usually pay you by the finished hour. Now, in my limited experience with recording those kind of books, you have maybe 2 hours of raw recording. So you've been sitting there recording for 2 hours, okay? That, if you have made very few mistakes, is still going to take you quite a while to edit down. I have a little note in my studio for when I'm doing like regular game work, because there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of mistakes, and you're trying everything over and over. I've got it on there for every 45 minutes of recording time, raw recording time, I'll need at least 2 to 3 times that to finish it, to get it finished. And that's like, I'm talking about cutting out everything, processing it, cutting it into files. And some people can really edit quickly. So if you can do that, if you can learn that, then you can really cut down the time that you're going to waste, if you're trying to do an audiobook. But that's most of the audiobooks now that you'll find on Audible, especially, are done by one person in their home studio doing everything. And what kind of deal they negotiate is all up to them, because the whole era of high-powered agents getting famous people to record your book, like I guess there was a guy that used to do all of Stephen King's novels, and he made until he got hurt in an accident. He did like close to $1 million or more a year. Just that was his income because there was nobody else doing it, and but now, like I said, I've seen people say, "Oh yeah, I'll read your 10,000 word novel." Okay, well I don't have much of a budget. Oh, I'll do it. I'll do it for like $200 or $100. I'm like, freaking way. That's working for 5 cents an hour. If that. I mean, it's just insane. But again, the people who are good at it, they can crank out a book in a few days and get it all done, and then there they go. They got because a book will take you several hours. So you figure, well, it's $5 to $1,000 depending on how many hours it runs and stuff. So but if you could be voice acting for like things like anime or games, especially games, you're gonna make a lot more money with a lot less hassle and a lot less time, because most game scripts are very short, and even if it's the entire thing, because you're doing it, it's still not going to be that endless process, and your voice does not have to be the exact same tone and pitch and delivery all the time, so.
Also, all the repeated lines that you only have to record once.
You would think so. You would think so, yeah, because it's. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, and you do that for every job. Now, I usually that I did a specific thing. That wasn't the actual real recording. I just did that to sort of give people an idea what it was. But when you're doing it for real, that's all the kind of stuff you have to sort of work out with your client. How they want to do it. Now, me personally, I try to set up my contract so that I'm basically recording their script and the characters they want, but I'm giving them the raw recordings. I'll take out really bad stuff and like endless space, but I don't do all the editing if I can help it. Because it's anything like that. You're negotiating. So if you can negotiate to do less work for the same amount of money, that's what you want to do. But for the little guys, they often don't have the money. So, and from my experience, a lot of these small ones, I'll end up like cutting stuff up a lot for them, so they don't have to deal with it. But what's good about that is then if that game does well, then they come back to you the next time and say, oh, well, we want to hire you because it was awesome and it was great. I think, thank you. That's what you got to do. Yes. Well, Dying Light 2, I can't say much about that, but I can say the company, Techland, They actually, someone referred me to them, and it was a company that I was working for that did localization, but for games. And they had offices in Berlin and Hong Kong. And that's all they did, is they were like a go-between. So they had a good deal going. They didn't have to actually do anything. They were just hiring contractors all over the world to record the scripts. And sometimes they would be hired to translate them, localize them, and sometimes they'd be hired to record them, and all for games. And they didn't do anything. They were just like the go-between. Yeah, so that's a good deal. But
All profit, no work.
oh, you'd think so, but they also get all the grief. I found that out because one of the games I did for them, what was it called? It was something core. What's that?
Armored Core?
No, nothing you probably ever heard. It's called Wanted Core. Wanted Core. Corpse or Core. I'm trying to think. It was supposed to be like Wanted Corporation. That's what gets me confused. This is a French developer, and they wanted to spend no money.
Well, there was their first two mistakes.
Yeah, well, again, that's the way it is. And so anyway, it was like a sort of a quick, not quite top-down shooter, but it's more like that isometric kind of view. And it was, basically you're supposed to be two bounty hunters, and you go down to a planet, and you knock off whoever you're supposed to do, and you go back to your ship and add up points. It was really basic, but this company that I was working for, the localization, we got a deal where it's like, okay, you're going to record all the voiceovers for this with the different actors that we need, and, you'll get X amount of money. And I'm like, well, that's not much money. But they're like, well, do the best you can. Literally, that's what they did. Because it was just, they weren't involved. Right. They're just like, their client is the French developer. I didn't even know who it was. What's that?
Sorry.
No, go ahead. What?
No, I was just about to ask, was that Echo? But you said you don't know.
Well, if you look up Wanted Core, Core like CORP, I'm sure it says there who the developer was. I just don't remember because it was one of those. It's one of these experiences that I try to forget because it ended up becoming kind of a disaster, and I made bad decisions at times. And I'll be absolutely honest, because I had no other ways around things, and I was trying not to spend more of my own money to get the job done. Long story short, one line was missed. Out of the entire script, one line was missed by a female actor. When you're working with these scripts, they're all on spreadsheets, and it's easy to miss something. And there was no quality control until after it was like a month later. They came back and said, "Oh, we don't have this line," But it wasn't, of course, I wasn't talking to the French developer. I was hearing from my guy, and he's like, "We're getting all kinds of shit because you didn't get this in there." I'm like, "Oh, okay, no problem. I'm sure I recorded it." I didn't record it. That was in my earlier production days. I have all kinds of systems in place that prevent that from happening now. But then it was a learning curve. Whenever you're working for yourself, you're learning. So I was like, okay, well, don't worry, I'll take care of it. So I find the line, and it's like, okay, it's this actor named Christine. Great. Call Christine. Christine's not around. She has gone on vacation. She has gone to Europe, and she will not be back for another month. Okay? So
Your impersonation skills.
Yeah.
he has hit it on the head. He has hit it on the head. I said, can I impersonate her voice? I'm thinking to myself, this is the worst possible thing I could do. This is the biggest cheat ever. I said, can I do that? Well, I tried it. And I did everything I could do to make it sound just like her. I mean, I went over and over, and I had the pitch right, but some voices, you're just not in your wheelhouse, And I've done, female sounding characters before, but this, I'm trying to impersonate a person I know very well, and it just, that failed miserably. So, long story short, a little late to that, but long story short, Christine finally returned. She came back sooner than expected, thank God. got her to record this line at my house. Quickly, it was all done. Finally, they're done. Everything was good. But the localization company was all upset, understandably so. However, as much as I thought, well, that was a complete fail, I've ruined my reputation now. Because I had worked for them for a couple of years. It was like, this was a disaster, Within a month, they said, oh, one of our clients is needing someone to do English placeholder stuff, like they were talking about in the other panel. But they're a Polish developer. Would you be interested in helping them? I was like, well, is this, and I put it very, diplomatically, would this be through you? And they're like, no, we're just gonna, hook you up with them on our own. I was like, oh, yes, fine. So that was the beginning of my cooperation with Techland. I worked on, I think they were doing Dead Island, Riptide, then they did Call of Juarez, and they did all these other things. And all of that, basically what I was doing was all of the placeholder stuff. In the beginning, I did everything. So all of the voices, and they would actually have me change, character voices. So it was like, I'm like, this is just like doing audio books. But I was getting paid better. So that's the difference. And it done on my own kind of schedule. But it was basically like that. There's dozens and dozens of characters in these things, and you're having to create a new voice for each one because they needed them to sound different.
Tell me, is there like a cut with you that says every single character?
Not in the video game, not in the actual end game. But the good thing with those is that with each of those, they went and then they'd hire me to do a voice for the real game. So that was great. And they were doing that because their whole production of audio for the final game was already contracted out to people in Los Angeles, okay? So I wouldn't have even been up for auditions in this type of thing. But because I was working for them, they're like, we want you to hire him for, one of the characters, you pick it. That's what they tell the Hollywood guys. And they'd be like, well, we don't know this guy. Doesn't matter. We're paying you. You're going to hire him for whatever character. Okay.
We've already got him. We're paying him already. We might as well use what we got.
And exactly, they liked me because I was doing a good job and I would be fast, because everything's quick production. So that's how that started. So I ended up doing like all their trailers, for their stuff, and it's been great. But Dying Light 2, I can tell the company has gotten very successful because now it's also very convoluted. To be perfectly honest, in Dying Light, it was very well. I felt like everything was very well administered. You knew who to talk to for whatever problem it was. I'm on the other side of the ocean, but now it's been every session that I've done with them, it's been by committee. So you can imagine, instead of one person telling you what they think they want to hear, you have several people. One is the creative director, one is the writer, one is the person who's designing the characters, because they have all these different people now for each little aspect of it. And every one of them wants to keep their job. So every one of them needs to have input. So
You look very busy.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm thinking this is typical Hollywood, but usually commercial. Games they've learned. Games are thought of as an artistic endeavor, by most of the studios that are putting them together, just like movies. But you still get that by committee crap for commercials and stuff like that. And that's the worst, absolutely the worst. Anyway, that was a long story.
George, you're talking about the characters and like figuring out the voices, and especially when you're doing multiple characters. Yeah. The only thing that I can't wrap my head around is because, like, obviously you guys have talked about, like, sometimes you're in a time crunch and they tell you, like, right off the top of your head, figure something out. What is the process that you do so that you know that you're giving them a voice and it's not just a rehash of like something you've already done, or like how do you create? You talked about how you made Duncan Fisher many times before, and like so how does, especially if you only have a couple seconds, like how do you?
Well, with games where you actually get to work with the developers one-on-one, face-to-face, that can happen. But with the stuff with Techland, it wasn't quite that intense and sudden. And it also, for lack of a better term, it didn't matter as much because it wasn't for the final game. So I'll be absolutely honest, when I was doing all the placeholder stuff for Dying Light, because I was doing everything by myself, the first Dying Light game, or maybe Call of Juarez, it was Call of Juarez. When I was doing that all by myself, it was like I did all the women characters, all the little ancillary characters, all the stuff, and it was just like whatever I could come up with off the top of my head. And looking back on that, that was not always the best choice because, you know, sometimes you're in a mood that you don't give a shit, you know, and because you know it doesn't matter. Now, if it mattered, it would be a whole different thing. But everything I had been giving them, they were like, this is good. You know, they just wanted a natural English-speaking person to do it who knew how to act so that would put their, you know, the scenarios into context, because that's half the battle what they're doing with these things. It's just they put the placeholders in there, see if it runs too long, see if it's, you know, going to be working, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and in some cases I did ridiculous voices, you know, like cartoonish, this would never be in the real game kind of voices. It was a lot of fun, but sometimes pull out a lot of stuff from, like, you know, Futurama and, you know, The Simpsons, anything that I could even remotely, like, impersonate just to make a different sound because I knew what I had just done for the other thing. So that's one aspect. But, like, a lot of that, what you're asking, comes down to having acting ability, you know, and that's one of those things that some people tell you, well, you got to, you know, train with a lot of people, and that's great if you can do it. And some people are just more natural at it. Some people are natural mimics, you know, and acting is just one of those things. So, oh, is this your brother?
Yeah.
Hi, I met your other brother, Novel. You said you guys have been doing all this stuff. When I was earlier, we were talking, and he said, "Oh yeah, you guys used to play Mech Warrior and stuff all the time."
We still do.
Well, that's good. Well, nice to meet you. What's your name?
Isaiah.
Isaiah. Nice to meet you, man. So anyway, the question of how you come up with these things really quick and on the spot is just a matter of experience. I mean, if I was a novice, I can remember back in the day, because that's how it went with Mech Warrior 4, to be perfectly honest. Except for, like, Duncan Fisher and I think one of the like your.
You did a guy in Black Knight.
Yeah, I did that one first. I did that first. Yeah, Black Knight was actually first. Yeah, Black Knight was first. That was Colonel Lawson or something like that. Yeah, I did that one first. Lawhorn. That's what it was. Lawhorn. Yeah. See, but the way it worked in Mercenaries is it was just like they really at times didn't seem to care what voice I did, and it really shows now, because if you play that game now, those voices some of them sound really terrible, you know. But again, they were just like so spur of the moment. It's like, you know, we need something for the Steiners, and it, you know, first thing, and I said, well, what's that? You know, I had no idea, because I didn't know anything about BattleTech except what they would tell me when I was in the booth. It's like, oh, they're this whole, you know, group of people are based on Germanic tribes, and I'm like, what? Okay. So, well, what do you want them to sound like? I don't know, somebody German. Yeah. Literally, but they said, well, don't make them like Hogan's Heroes, but make, you know, something German sounding. Okay. So literally, I just pulled this really bad Schwarzenegger impression out of my ass, and that's what they stuck in there. And I'm like, okay, whatever, you know. Again, they just wanted them to be different. That's it. They just wanted each voice to be different without hiring another person, because that would take more time, money, blah blah blah. Because they would hire me like basically for a session. It's like, well, you're going to come in for 2 hours. We're going to pay you, you know, X number of dollars. I think back then it was something like $400. So you ate $400 for 2 hours? That sounds awesome. And then your reputation goes to hell 20 years later. You did that voice, that was terrible. It was racist and, you know, just insulting. I'm like, yeah, I know.
There's a video that's been going around for a long time that's like Duncan Fisher blooper. Did you make that?
I did not make it.
Where did that come
That came from the sound engineer being funny. Bas-
funny though.
Oh, it's extremely funny. I've told people that 100 times. I completely believe that blooper reel is what kept the character
Yes.
alive.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it just would have died this death a long time ago. But that blooper reel is it. And they sprung that on me at a Christmas party. I mean, I've told that story before. Oh, it was terrible. I was there with my first wife. We were at this Christmas party for the place. I was like, "This is great. We're getting invited to parties now. Isn't this awesome?" And she was like, "Wow, you're becoming somebody." I'm like, "Yeah, that's right." Then we go. "Hey, come on! We're all going to go in the studio, sound studio. We're going to listen to this thing that Jack made." Jack was the sound engineer. I'm like, "What did Jack make?" I'm like, "Okay, go in there." It's like, "Yeah, George didn't know we did this." And I'm suddenly going, "Oh shit, shit! What didn't I know?" And they started playing it.
At that moment, George knew.
Oh yeah, all these horrible things. I'm like, "Oh my God." Some of them, yeah, some of it I admit were my bad jokes in the booth, terribly offensive, and others were them, because they at times would be just like, "Hey, we got George in the booth. You want Duncan Fisher to say something crazy?" So they get all these emails flying through the office. And people were like, "Oh, say this, it's from a movie, say this." And it's like, oh my God. It was hilarious at the time. And then during the party, it was slightly embarrassing. And my wife's like, "Wow, you're pretty abusive there." It just was a joke. I wasn't thinking anyone else would ever hear it. And then, like I said, it was so funny though, it was so well received. And when they debuted the game publicly at a mall, because back then you'd have like these LANs, that was like the store. It was full of computers and everybody could go in there and play games. Well, they did it for Mercenaries at a local mall. They're playing it over the damn PA in the store, and I'm just like, oh my God, because he's dropping F-bombs left and right. It was not the edited one. It was like, "Oh, what the fuck is wrong with you?" And it was just, and they're just like, "Isn't this great?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's great."
All these kids are like, "I want this game."
Yeah, well, you'd think there would be kids. It was not. It was people like your age and older. People had driven. This was in Massachusetts. People had driven up from New Jersey and Philly because they wanted to see this. They wanted to play this game because they were all psyched about it. So I was like, okay, I'm thinking that's insane, but not. I get it now.
Yeah. Warrior game, so
I guess so. But it was just crazy. It was crazy. And that was my first exposure to like fans, because people were like, "Oh, can you sign this?" And because they had these, like, they don't make them anymore, but they had these giant fake boxes, the game boxes. Like you used to buy a game and it came in a cool box with an instruction manual and all this awesome stuff. It's like now you get nothing. Steam. Oh, you get some wallpapers. Well, great. Hang that on my wall. So. But then they'd make these big, tall boxes. And I have actually two boxes. One is from Black Knight. I have the Black Knight box. It's this big, huge thing. It's really a prized possession. And another one from the game I did for that company before, which was called Majesty. And that was another, it was like a fantasy sim thing. So I have those. But damn, I wish I could have one of those mercenary boxes. Yeah. You have no idea how much I want one of those and how much I could auction it off for. I've had other stuff in the past that I've auctioned for charity. People have different things that they're doing, Twitch streaming or whatever, and anytime that I've done these things, I've always tried to get like swag from the developers, like shirts or anything I can get, and like all those, like they did last year, or a couple years ago, they did the coasters. It was like Harebrained Schemes had put out the coasters, and I have this. Mitch had always kept saying, "We're going to put Duncan Fisher in that game. We're going to have you in the game, George." I was like, okay. Never happened. So it's like, okay, Mitch, I'll believe it. And then when I saw him at the MechCon, they had these conventions. They did it in Vancouver. Last time I saw him, he says, "Oh, we came this close to putting you in BattleTech." I'm like, "Well, that sucks." And he goes, "Yeah, I didn't know if I should tell you or not." I said, "You shouldn't have." Now I hate you. But he said, "Yeah," he says, we've got plans. You didn't hear this from me. He says, we got plans going in the future if the DLCs, keep going and people are enjoying playing the BattleTech, the strategy game. He says, we've got plans. You're going to be a whole thing of Solaris. And I'm like, yeah, right. I've not fell for that once, Mitch. He said, well, it might be a few between now and then. But yeah, whatever. You got you know where I am. You can.
Don't tell me your plans. Tell me what this
Yeah.
paycheck-
Tell me when it's gonna happen. Yeah, tell me when it's gonna happen. Don't hold it in front of me because I know a lot of people want that. They stuck me in Mercenaries 5, that Mech Warrior 5. They were telling me left and right, oh yeah, we're gonna be calling you in for some stuff. We'll have you audition for all these characters. Nothing. What they ended up doing is out of the blue one day, as you know, it was just released not that long ago. 3 weeks before it was released, they sent me an email and say, hey, are you interested? We want to have you play this character. I'm like, oh, sure. Okay, I thought you were just going to release the game soon. He's like, oh yeah, we're just filling it in. Okay, fine. But how much are you going to pay me? Oh, well, we don't know. I said, well, you find out. Yeah, you find out, because literally the person that was emailing me was just told that morning, contact this guy. He didn't know who the hell I was. He had no idea. Now, because he was a new hire. The last game he worked on was it FIFA, the soccer? Oh, yeah. That's the last things he's worked on. He got hired by, them to work on the mech game. Yeah. So, he's one of the producers, so he's the one in charge. He's like, oh yeah, well, you know what? I don't know how much our budget is. Let me find out. Okay, you do that. And all the time I'm thinking, this ain't gonna happen. This is not gonna happen. Well, it did. Thank goodness. It ended up being like Allied Base Commander 3 or something like that. And I'm like, well, what is he supposed to sound like? Oh, just sound like yourself. Just sound desperate. I said, okay, so that's going to be a stretch. Okay. Yeah, well, basically it was like, yeah, you're just going to shout out all this stuff. I'm like, so basically I'm screaming at the player that all my shit's getting blown up, and I don't really have to do anything other than just sound terrified and nervous. Yeah, okay. I mean, it literally took me 15 minutes to record all the stuff that I did. It was a couple of spreadsheets worth of stuff, but still, I was like, okay. And it just makes me think of when I did the original stuff. I'd come in like every couple weeks, and they'd have, a couple hours, and it'd be pretty involved things, But now it's like, whatever. Whatever, man. I mean, the fans who like that franchise and the character, they've been nothing but awesome to me, and I still have the most fun whenever I do that, that guy and that character. And I'm more than happy to do any of the other stuff, like with the Neverwinter Nights. Nobody knows I do any of that, but it's like when I do the show them your steel attack, everyone goes, oh, I played that voice pack. Yeah, you did, because that was a neutral one. When you're playing that game, you don't want to have something that's really weird. You just want to have something quick. Male neutral warrior, perfect. Click. But yeah, and I still remember doing those. Those were done in Boston, and that it was a separate company that did them from the game developer, and they just said, we just need somebody that sounds epic. Like, okay, and that was it. Show them your steel attack, and what was another one? Make this fight count. It will be your last. And hey, doesn't that sound just so much like Duncan Fisher almost? It's like, oh, hire him. He's pompous sounding. That's good. So it was good. Those characters are just easy to do, but people love them. That's fine. That's fine with me. And I mean, it's not thousands of people, but the people that do know them, they like them. And even the people that don't know them. That's right. I still appreciate you coming here because, hey, otherwise I'd be talking to nobody. So, what time did we start? I don't even know. Was it about 4? Oh, okay, so I haven't gone over. If you have anything you want to ask me, or, yeah, you got another one. You got a lot of questions. You're inquisitive.
Questions over at the other panel.
Oh, well then, yeah, then I said, ask me, I'll give you what I can tell you.
Well, actually, what I wanted to know from
Them,
everybody
yep.
was, do you guys ever come across a job where you're like, no? What is that like? I mean, how bad does it have to be?
Okay, I can give you the answers like those panel people. I can give you my experience, but their basic thing would be like, well, my agent got me this thing and he said, are you interested in this? And you read it and go, I don't know, maybe. You know, if it's, most of the time you get chosen, especially if you have an agent that's sending you stuff, you know, they know what you can do, they know what you sound like, and they would filter that. You know, they'd filter that stuff out if it's terrible or offensive, because you have no idea how many horrible, offensive kind of characters are put in front of you. You know, and they'll say, do you want to do this? And I will not do that, because I've learned my lessons. Plus, I don't, you know, I don't think like that. You know, it's one thing to make a joke on a spur of the moment when you're just goofing around with a bunch of people you're used to and trust. It's another thing to put it on a script that's purposely putting out there to be annoying and offensive. And believe me, there's been lots of that stuff come across my desk. But what they would basically tell you is their agent would say, hey, are you interested in this? And then they most likely would say yes, you know, because we're all working for ourselves. We've got to make money. And in the agent's case, you're working for them too. But for me, it's always, you know, 99.9% of the stuff that's, you know, sent to me as an audition, or, you know, somebody wants to directly hire me because they know me from what I've done. I don't have a problem with it, you know. If it's something I feel I can do, I'm happy to do it. And, you know, because I need money. I'm just getting by. My wife hasn't been working. So, you know, it's great. But there are certain things I just won't do anymore. Because I did a game for it was one of the mech games, but not, it was like released on the iPhone, I think. It was like, I forget what it was called. It was like a mech, not Mech Commander, but it was, oh, it was, well, that's the thing. It was done by this Singapore company, okay? And they had what you could really I didn't know this at the time, but they had basically a very racist view of America and American actors in general, but they also wanted to spend no money. So they had me playing black characters. Was not happy about this. But again, you're in the studio, this is when you find out. It's like, oh, you're gonna do this. I'm like, you know, you've already been hired to do all these other voices and they're throwing this one at you. And that's not a voice that I want to do. You know, I've done it, but I don't want to do it because it's just the bad idea now.
It doesn't feel right.
It doesn't feel right. And I understand. And when I'm casting things, I try to get as diverse as possible, you know, because there's so many people that don't get opportunities.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue for me. I really don't, I mean, I can do, you know, any old English guy or what, but, you know, I don't want to be asked to do the urban youth. That's a bad idea in general, you know, but it used to be done all the time. You know, there's a lot of actors that still do all these different, you know, persons of color and characters of all different backgrounds, but they're just as white as me. And there's a lot of arguments back and forth about it.
I've heard arguments on both sides, and some make good arguments, others make terrible.
It doesn't matter. It's like, what's the right thing to do?
Exactly.
With everything that goes on, just don't do something stupid. You know, that's not necessary. There's so many people that need jobs.
Exactly.
That just as much as you need one, you know, so anyway. So yeah, there's been a few of those things that, like, I just wish I didn't do.
Two of my favorite characters in Mercenaries were Duncan and Spectre, but I can't find who Spectre was.
Spectre was, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I want to say Frank Aronson, but that's not right. Spectre was done by a stage actor that lived in the area. Very good guy, but completely dropped off the face of the earth. Yeah, I would have to look through my stuff to find his name because it's so hard to find him. I found him once because I was looking up all the different people several years ago just to see what happened. And yeah, he vanished. And the reason was when he was His experience with the whole thing was complete opposite of mine. Complete opposite of mine. He was given so much shit because people just didn't like it. For some reason, a lot of people just did not like his performance, and it's always like that. But I mean, there's going to be people that love it. If you were in that last panel, you heard Elisa talking about the Borderlands 3 and all that, and how awesome it was. Right before I went in there, I read somebody on Twitter who's, talking about games and how much that sucked. They hated everything about it. And I'm like, wow, I haven't played it, I haven't heard it, I didn't know what it was. So I'm reading this like, holy crap, they tear it into the writers. They said, I'm not blaming the voice actors because everything else was terrible, but this was a terrible idea to get these people. I'm like, oh my God. And that's the kind of thing that an actor will read and go, oh shit, But again, they were being very specific and saying, I'm not blaming the actors. But then it was just hilarious because the next half hour I'm sitting there on a table and she's like, oh, the voice director was awesome and the writing was awesome, and I'm like, I guess I'll have to look at that myself. Yeah, see, it's just, I don't know.
Borderlands 3, I can definitely empathize with that simply because from a game design perspective, it's kind of, it seemed forced.
Forced?
Thing overall, but all of her lines and everything, like she said, the scariest thing was being a
replacement. Right. Oh yeah, you don't want to do that. Yeah. Yeah, and no actor wants to be put in that position. They do and they don't, because it's a terrifying prospect that you're going to be replacing somebody.
The community loves to hate.
Oh.
And same with Claptrap. It's like he's so annoying, so we hate him.
Yes.
But he's so loved because
exactly. That's it. If you're a character people hate, that's almost as good as being a character people love.
We should do a good job, though.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're usually the ones that are written really well because everybody looks.
What are? I missed the first word. Yes and no, but yeah. I mean, any actor would rather play a villain. Any actor. They're more fun. Most of us aren't villains. So you're really getting to play something different than but yeah, any actor would be like, oh yeah, I'll play the villain, that's awesome. I mean, I'm talking about voice actors, stage and screen, that's a whole other thing, because some of them are going to have a lot of people behind them going, well, you don't want to ruin your image. That's not so much now. I'm thinking like older Hollywood, those the same people were always the heroes and but nowadays they're all.
Casting was a lot harder to
Oh
do.
yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Because we were talking on this, and the ways of criticism, how much of that has that affected the way you look back at some of your older works? Like, you see a lot of criticism nowadays, and you're like, man, that project I really loved, and now I kind of hate.
Well, again, I basically touched on that. It's like certain things that I didn't think that much about at the time, like the stuff in Mercenaries, that's what I'm talking about, not the other game, because at the time I was like, this is a bad idea. But when I was doing the Mercenary stuff, it was just like every other game job or any other job I ever did. It's like, okay, we need an Italian guy. Okay, do it. We need an Australian guy. Okay, right. Where am I going to get that voice? It's like you don't get to practice. You don't get to do anything. I didn't. It's just like, do it. Like they were talking about, we'll get voice coaches, and some people are looking at YouTube videos. That's what you do now. But in 1998, that wasn't an option.
2004, 2005, when YouTube was
Yeah.
barely existing.
Right. I mean, my exposure to an Australian accent for one of those characters, I don't remember, it was one of the pilots you could hire to be your wingman kind of thing. My exposure to Australian voice was Steve Irwin. This is the most, right, yeah. Oh, yeah, don't worry, mate.
Steve Irwin.
Yeah, right. Here's the world's most dangerous slug. I'm going to put it in my mouth. That was all I thought of when I thought of Australia, because I didn't know anything. You don't get exposed to that. What's that?
I just think of John Patrick Larry.
Well, there you go. He did it, but he is more well thought of. So, and again, if you have time, nowadays it's awesome. If someone says, we need a Swedish guy, because I did a Swedish voice for a character in, what was that called? Heroes of New Earth. It's like one of these online, yeah. Yeah, Heroes of New Earth. Yeah, I did a couple of characters from them, but one of them was this guy. He was like a wild man guy. He was I can't remember. And he could turn into a bear, or he had a bear companion, like a giant grizzly bear. But they wanted him to sound Scandinavian. Okay. So, whatever.
Which part?
Yeah. So it was that type of thing. It's like, well, okay. So I went online. I'm like trying to find something that was Swedish, to pick up that voice, and it was just, yeah, bear, you just, I'm like, I can't even do it now. I sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger, because I got that in my head. Okay, bear, come here, something, I don't remember. I did it okay. At the time, I'm not embarrassed about it. If I hear it played, like on the internet, it doesn't embarrass me. So it's like, I know I did it okay. What's that?
I'm trying to remember what the character's name was.
Yeah, I'm sure I could look it up, but it doesn't. You can look it up when you're bored. When you're trying to fall asleep. But nowadays, it's great. Most of the characters I get are right in my wheelhouse. Like I got an audition for a game. I don't know if it's for the game or for just the trailer, but they want, sort of like a deep old Conan, but they don't want that accent like Schwarzenegger. They just want an old blood. So it's like, yeah, I do that. I'm doing that for Buff Stud Horse, for the game. It's a variation of that. So that's I do. I also do a lot of, we want someone that sounds just like Gandalf. Okay. Well, just that, they want you to sound old and doddering, that, an old wizard. You get that a lot, so that's fine. Those are great, and when you do it, people are very happy. They go, oh, that's great, but.
I will admit, the one Russian, the Kerensky voice you did for the one text that talks about it was great.
Yeah,
I love that so much.
Great. I remember I'd done it just for jollies on my own way back, and then he wanted to do it again. I'm like, well, and suddenly I was like, well, if it's for text, I'm going to do it good. Because it was like, I really respect the guy. I love working with him, and it was like, yeah, I'm going to do this the best I can. He says, well, you better, because I know a lot of Russian guys. Because he works right here in D.C. area. He goes, I know a lot of Russian guys, and I got a specific voice that I'm thinking of for this character. He says, I know a really old Russian guy, and he sounds, very specific. I said, I'll do my best. I said, but if you don't like it, you can tell me, and I'll do it again, because I want it to be good, But he loved it. He said, oh my God. He said, this is perfect. I said, is it okay? I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you liked it, because that's the most feedback I've ever gotten from any of those kind of things, because I never, you just don't.
I have a bunch of Russian coworkers, and it was pretty much spot on.
I'm thrilled to hear that. I only practiced it for that afternoon.
Hey,
It's like the whole thing, I was like.
But I know that might sound like a lot maybe to some of you, but to me it's nothing. I don't get to practice, and a lot of times they just say, this is what we want. So if I'm not access to a YouTube video where I can just refresh my mind what this accent is, it just, certain things I can mimic very well, and certain things, no. So that's how it is. But I'm glad you guys like that. I'll have to tell them I heard people came to see me with that no text, and they want, like, oh, he'll be thrilled. He'll be thrilled. He comes across as one way, but he really he's a little different another way. If you know Tex, do you know him personally?
Not personally. He told me on the internet to tell you that.
Okay. Well, that's how I know him. I know.
Yeah,
But I am one of the few people that knows what he looks like.
Yeah, that I can't say.
That's not what you'd think. But anyway.
5 foot,
I was
they're
gonna
really
say,
skinny
all
guys.
creators like hearing positive feedback on their creation.
Oh, absolutely. And I try to do that whenever I'm out there, and I see these games. I'm telling everybody that if I am honestly impressed, I'll tell them. And any of my thoughts that I come up with, like one guy out there, he had some stuff, I think our time's up, but one guy out there, he had a game, and I said, man, this really reminds me of like Mike Mignola's Hellboy. And he just almost fell over. He was like, oh my God, thank you so much. You have no idea. That's exactly what I was going for, but in this pixelated way. And I was like, yeah, it really has that look to it. And he's like, oh, it's like the best thing he heard in 2 years, he said. Like, oh, wow, okay. So go find that game. Anyway, we're done. If anybody does want one of these cards and don't want to have to deal with the actual autograph thing, I'll be happy to sign you one. I had them made, so I'll just throw them at you if you don't. Because
That's the catch.
yeah. But unlike some autograph things, these will cost you nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. You know, so it was tough to pick because, as I've said before, it's like this Duncan Fisher who never appears on screen, and here's the other guy. A lot of people know me from this is from the Majesty game, and then all these were tried to pick what are the most known or most popular things. So it's like Dying Light. There's the hero of New Earth guy I was talking about. I said there's like a bear guy. Yeah, this little guy here, and then there's the wizard. He was also in New Earth. Yeah.
I love, it's the same graphic that Tex uses for like when he had the Duncan Fisher.
Well, again, that's a guy. That was a fan that drew that for me. It was another fan. He does a lot of stuff for me, and it's awesome. You know, it's like that's perfect. Exactly.
You just sort of picture him waiting in and kapow!
Yeah, he's like, kapow!
The goatee was actually threw me off when I first saw it. I was like, he's got it. All right.
Well, again, it was just his total idea, and I was like, that looks a hell of a lot better than me. Yeah, he's chiseled. I like that. He got the chiseled chin and brow. Like that's
It looks
awesome.
like he's just got a fifth of scotch that just never seems to be empty.
Oh, and like, literally, that's what I picture. This kind of a cartoon animated guy when I'm doing anything like that for now. You know, because that's what I was envisioning when I did the audiobook thing I did that somebody wrote a short story. It's like, that's the guy, you know. This guy, he just sounds like Sean Connery, and that's why they made him look like that.
Yeah.
But that was actually done by the studio. You know.
There are worse things than being compared to Sean Connery.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My goodness. Yeah, and some of those other ones talk about, there's a Minuteman down here,
I love that game.
Blackjack, the Bullet,
Fortissimo.
Fortissimo.
It holds up. The aesthetics are great.
It's the way to get it now because, man, when it was released, they did all kinds of terrible shit, and you couldn't play it on half the systems now. But now that it's like on Steam or Good Old Games, one of those, it's great. You know, those are the best things ever because it's brought back all these old games. You know?
It was like unplayable for like 10 years.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Now you can play it again.
Yep.
Because they tried to
I
shoot on all the software.
Try
into it.
the old MechWarrior games from Activision and Fastpass.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Now, just so you know, these other couple on here, these guys that look like little cartoons, that was from a PBS show I did. It was called Professor Fizzy's Lunch Lab. And basically it was for kids. It was for kids, but it was basically like sort of teaching kids like health and nutrition, but with these characters. I wasn't Professor Fizzy, but I was other characters. Like this is supposed to be like the calcium knight. And they made it, you can't see it in this, but in the actual character, it looks like a calcium what do you call it, molecule. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yes, and of course, you know, he basically sounded like Duncan Fisher with an English accent. It's the simplest way to put it. That's right, Fizzy, of course. Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
But then this guy, this other blue guy, he's supposed to be just a cell, like a human body cell, but he was Sully the cell, and he drove a taxi. He's how you get the characters would get around the human body in his little taxi, and he, you know, sort of like that movie Fantastic Voyage. Like, come on, we're gonna go up to the brain.
The tiny submarine.
Yep.
George, would it be cool to get a quick picture of it?
Oh, absolutely. Anything you guys want. Yeah. No one seems to be needing a room, so we can do whatever we want. Oh, I was gonna get down.
Oh, that's fine.
All right.
I got it right here.
Okay.
Good enough.
Get really close.
It's like, how close do you want to get?
Right.
I got Purell. It's all good. All right. Does anybody want one of these?
Yes,
Okay, well, who's up first?
I was going to say, let's form a line.
Form a line, okay. This is my own autograph session.
Oh, yeah.
Name?
Doug.
Doug.
Good solid name.
Yep. It's a verb. I was just gonna write, hi Doug. This is mostly what I use for these things. Okay. I write, it is Solaris time. Most people want Duncan, and that's fine. Okay, we'll do that. But if you want me to write something specific, I'll be happy to do that, as long as it's not, long.
Not long or obscene or anything.
Oh, I'll write obscene. I just don't want to make everybody. don't want to make everybody wait. See, you know, some people would be, you know, kind of bummed that there wasn't a lot of people here, but I am not, because this allows me to do this kind of thing,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
I mean,
It's a lot more fun.
yeah, it's like, well, the big old group panel was great. They only asked like, what, 3 questions?
And I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, when that first guy started talking, I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he was like, so it's like, first question for all of you, and I'm like, well, there
yeah.
goes our hour.
That's what happened last year, and, you know, if you want people that are going to be succinct and to the point, don't ask a voice actor. It just doesn't happen.
Thank you so much.
Well, it all began.
I mean, literally, I mean, I've been in here for an hour and I still was able to talk. Hi, you're the guy who didn't even know me. And now you want. Now you want something, okay.
$5.
Now that's, you want to hire you for my agent. What can I write on here for you, man?
Remember your voice and never been a night.
You do? Oh, the show them your steel. Oh, fantastic. See, you did know me. You didn't even know.
Yes, I remember your voice.
All right. Do you want me to make it to Steven?
Yes.
Okay, you got it. That's cool. Well, hey, I'm glad.